The first warning did not come with explosions. It came with nothing. At the edge of the Galactic Council's sensor network, a routine scan returned an error. One system showed no traffic, no civilian signals, no background noise, just empty space. At first, no one cared. Human space had always been loud. Their ships talked too much. Their stations leaked signals. Their planets burned with constant radio noise. A single quiet system meant nothing. Then a second system went silent. Then a third. Then all of them. Within one standard hour, every known human-controlled star system dropped to absolute zero transmission. No distress calls. No warnings. No final messages. Just silence. Council analysts ran the scans again. And again, they widened the range, checked for stealth fields, interference, or weapon effects. Nothing matched. The stars were still there. The planets still orbited normally. Energy readings showed cities intact, power grids stable, and atmospheres untouched. Humanity had not been attacked. Humanity had vanished. The council chamber filled with low, confused voices. Several species laughed nervously. Humans were not considered important enough to cause panic. They were young, emotional, disorganized. Their military was large, but inefficient. Their technology clever, but inelegant. Someone suggested a civil collapse. Another suggested mass migration. A third claimed it was a failed experiment. Then the exploration ship Kethare crossed the human border. The ship reported no resistance, no automated defenses, no patrols. Inside the first human system, the crew found shipyards, perfectly empty. Docking clamps open, repair arms folded neatly. No damage, no debris. Military stations were powered down in sequence, not destroyed. Data cores had been wiped clean, layer by layer, with care and time. This was not panic. This was preparation. The crew landed on a human world once marked as overcrowded and chaotic. Cities still stood, buildings intact, vehicles parked in lines. Even personal items remained, as if people had simply stood up and walked away. On an old orbital satellite, a single message repeated on a loop, using outdated human code. Short, simple, calm. We warned you. You chose silence. The message had been broadcasting for decades. No one had noticed. Back in the council chamber, laughter stopped. Records were pulled. Old meeting logs. Archived votes. Transcripts of human representatives speaking about deep space anomalies and non-sentient consumption swarms. Every request had been delayed. Every warning labeled inconclusive. Every proposal voted down. Humans had not argued. They had not threatened. They had simply stopped attending. Now, across hundreds of systems, they were gone. Not destroyed. Not defeated. Not fleeing. They had left everything behind, except their ships, their soldiers, and their future. A senior counselor finally spoke the thought no one wanted to say aloud. If they prepared this carefully, they were not running from us. Long-range sensors suddenly detected something new, far beyond mapped space. Massive energy shadows. Artificial. Moving information. The signature was unmistakable. Human. The chamber fell silent again. This time, no one laughed. Because the question was no longer where did humanity go. It was what did they leave us alone with. The Galactic Council did not adjourn after the silence. They could not. The chamber remained filled long after the alarms faded, its vast ring of seats occupied by beings who suddenly felt smaller than they ever had before. For centuries, the Council had believed itself to be the final authority of the known galaxy. Now it sat trapped between ignorance and fear. Orders were given. Not military orders. Those would come later, but archival ones. Retrieve everything. The High Archivist commanded. Every human record. Every vote. Every dismissed proposal. I want their words. What followed was not a flood of data, but a slow, uncomfortable uncovering. Human records were quiet. Not because they were incomplete, but because they were painfully consistent. The earliest appearances of humanity showed excitement, curiosity, an eagerness to belong. Their diplomats smiled too often. Their voices carried emotion the Council found unprofessional. They spoke of cooperation, shared defense, and joint exploration beyond the mapped rim. At first, the Council tolerated them. Then the warnings began. A human science envoy once stood before the chamber and displayed strange gravitational distortions detected beyond the galactic edge. She spoke of star systems collapsing without supernovae, of light vanishing where nothing should consume it. The council response had been polite, unverified, speculative, not a priority. Years later, another human delegation returned, this time with data gathered by unmanned probes that never came back. Their spokesman looked tired, older. His uniform was worn, not ceremonial. "We believe something is moving toward us," he said. "Not fast, but inevitable." The council voted to observe. Decades passed. Human requests grew more urgent, but never aggressive. They asked for shared sensor arrays, joint fleets, permission to place listening stations in deep space. The answer was always delay. Some council members privately mocked the humans, called them dramatic, claimed their fear came from their short species lifespan and obsession with threats. One counselor had even joked, on record, "They see monsters because they are afraid of the dark." That joke was replayed now, in silence. As the archives rolled on, a pattern became impossible to ignore. At some point, humanity stopped asking. Their diplomats still attended, but they spoke less. They stopped bringing proposals and instead submitted notices. Notices of ship movements. Notices of research expansions. Notices of border adjustments. The council barely paid attention. Then one final session appeared. A human representative stood alone. No entourage. No visual displays. Just a simple statement entered into the record. "We will no longer request council support regarding external threats," she said. "Humanity will take responsibility for its own survival." No one objected. No one asked why. The session ended early. That was the last official human appearance. In the present, the high strategist felt something tighten inside his chest. Humans had not been ignored once. They had been ignored repeatedly, consistently, and comfortably. While the council debated trade routes and internal disputes, humanity had been planning. A new report interrupted the review. Exploration teams sent to additional human systems returned with similar findings. But one discovery stood out. In a deep space relay station, far from any habitable world, a sealed data vault was found untouched. Inside was a map, not of the galaxy, but of beyond it. The map showed projected paths of something vast and spreading. Entire regions marked as consumed. Timelines extended across centuries, precise and cold. At the center of the projections was a single note, written in simple human language. "If this reaches the core, extinction probability exceeds 93%. The room grew colder. "This was classified?" one counselor asked. "No," replied the analyst. "It was submitted openly. 300 years ago." No one spoke. Then came the second interruption. A frontier defense outpost near the galactic rim stopped responding. Moments later, another. Sensor feeds showed stars dimming unnaturally, as if something massive passed between them and the observers. Not blocking light, removing it. Emergency fleets were mobilized. Warships that had not seen real combat in generations powered up with ceremonial precision. They arrived too late. Where a binary star system once burned brightly, there was now a void. Not debris. Not radiation, just absence. Space itself seemed thinner. The fleet commander ordered a retreat. Something followed them. It did not chase fast. It did not fire weapons. It simply moved closer, ignoring distance, ignoring conventional physics. Then it stopped. The pursuing darkness pulled back, as if losing interest. Council sensors screamed warnings as something else entered the region. From beyond detection range, shapes emerged, enormous, angular silhouettes that bent space around them. They did not broadcast identification codes. They did not speak. But their energy patterns matched something the analysts now recognized. Human. The unknown darkness shifted. Its form trembled, distorted, and then withdrew. The human vessels did not pursue. They simply held position, like a wall. The council watched the feed in stunned silence. Humans had built ships capable of facing the very threat the galaxy now feared. Ships built in secret. Ships built far away. Ships built alone. A junior counselor whispered the question that now haunted them all. How long have they been fighting this without us? No answer came. But as the human ships slowly vanished back into the dark, one final signal was detected, weak, narrow, and clearly not meant for the council. It was directed outward, beyond the stars. A status report. Perimeter secure. Phase continues. No council interference. The message ended there. The realization struck like a physical blow. Humanity had not disappeared because they were weak. They had disappeared because they were busy, and whatever was coming next, the Council was not part of the plan. The Galactic Council had always believed there would be warning. Every ancient disaster in recorded history came with signs: political tension, rising energy levels, unstable stars, or mass refugee movement. The galaxy had systems to detect chaos long before it arrived. This time, the warning came too late. The first star died without exploding. It simply faded. In the outer spiral arm, a yellow main sequence star dimmed over the course of several hours. Observatories watched in confusion as its fusion rate collapsed in perfect symmetry. There was no shockwave, no radiation spike, no debris cloud. The star went dark like a candle pinched between fingers. Then the planets froze. Within days, a second system followed. Then a third. The Council declared a level black emergency, an alert status that had not been used in over 10,000 years. Fleets were ordered to the rim. Scientists were pulled from every world. Even ancient species that had survived galactic cycles fell silent as they watched the data streams. Something was moving inward, and it was not alive in any way the galaxy understood. Council science teams worked without rest. They named the phenomenon the null advance, because wherever it passed, the universe behaved as if it had been edited, matter simplified, energy erased, complexity removed. Weapons tests failed instantly. Energy beams vanished mid-flight. Missiles lost mass and ceased to exist. Gravity-based weapons bent and then unraveled. The null advance did not fight. It consumed. A full battle group was sent to intercept it at the edge of a dying system. Hundreds of ships formed precise attack formations, firing in synchronized waves designed to overwhelm any known defense. None of the attacks landed. As the fleet closed distance, sensors began to fail, not from interference, but from lack of reference points. Space itself was losing definition. Then the ships began to disappear. One by one. No explosion. No wreckage. Just gone. The survivors retreated in panic, their engines tearing at space-time to escape. Less than 12% made it back. The council chamber filled again, this time with fear that could not be hidden. They had no defense, no strategy, no understanding. Someone finally said the word no one wanted to hear. Extinction. That was when the old human warnings were played again. This time not as archives, but as prophecy. The gravity distortions, the missing probes, the projected consumption paths. Every detail matched. Humanity had known. They had measured it, mapped it, timed it. And while the galaxy argued, humans had prepared for war against something that could eat stars. A new report arrived from the deep-range sensor network. The null advance had changed direction. It was no longer moving toward the galactic core. It was turning, not randomly, deliberately. It was heading toward a region the Council had never explored, an empty volume of space long dismissed as unremarkable. Human deep space. The realization struck hard and fast. This was not an invasion. This was a pursuit. The null advance was following something. The Council watched as the first contact between the two forces unfolded. At the boundary of observable space, the darkness slowed. Its structure shifted, spreading outward like a tide meeting resistance. Then, movement. From nothingness, massive objects appeared. Human ships. Not fleets, formations. They emerged without jump signatures, without distortion, as if space itself had opened its eyes and found them already there. These ships were enormous, but not ornate. Their surfaces were layered, scarred, functional. No glowing engines. No decorative lights. Just cold geometry and purpose. They did not announce themselves. They moved. The first human ship positioned itself directly in the path of the null advance. It did not fire a weapon. It activated something else. Space folded. Not violently. Not dramatically. Precisely. The darkness pressed forward and stopped. For the first time since its discovery, the null advance reacted. Its structure rippled, as if confused. Sections of it collapsed inward, then expanded again, searching for a path forward that no longer existed. Human ships spread out, forming a lattice across light years of space. Each ship anchored a point in reality, stabilizing space-time with impossible strength. The null advance tried to go around. Humanity had already anticipated that. More ships appeared, hundreds, then thousands, each locking into position like pieces of a cosmic machine. Gravity wells ignited. Time dilation fields layered over one another. The darkness strained. Then it broke. Not destroyed, contained. The null advance recoiled, pulling itself back from the lattice, retreating into the void it had come from. The human ships did not chase it. They held the line. Across the council chamber, no one spoke. They were watching a war fought without rage, without noise, without spectacle. A war fought with understanding. A junior analyst finally whispered, "They built this to stop it." A senior scientist corrected him softly. "No, they built this to survive it." A human signal suddenly broke through council communication filters. It was narrowband, directional, and clearly not meant to be received by anyone else. But the council heard it anyway. Containment successful, a calm human voice reported. Star loss minimized. Phase threshold holding. Another voice replied, older and tired. Good. How long can we hold? There was a pause. Long enough. The signal cut out. The human fleet began to withdraw, fading back into the dark like ghosts returning to their post. The null advance did not follow. For now, the council sat in stunned silence, surrounded by the evidence of their failure. Humanity had not asked for permission to defend the galaxy. They had simply done it. Alone. As emergency alerts continued to sound across the council network, one truth became impossible to deny. The galaxy was not facing extinction. It was facing irrelevance. Because somewhere beyond the stars, humanity was fighting a war older than politics, larger than civilization. And the council was nothing more than a spectator. The council believed the humans would vanish again. That was the expectation. That was the hope. After witnessing the containment of the null advance, many council members quietly assumed humanity would retreat back into the dark, sealing the edge of the galaxy and leaving the rest of civilization to recover in ignorance. That belief lasted exactly 12 hours. The first human transmission arrived without warning, bypassing every encryption layer the council possessed. It did not hijack systems or shut anything down. It simply appeared, calm, clean, and impossible to block. Every screen in the council chamber lit at once. No emblem, no anthem, no declaration of authority. Only a human figure, seated, wearing a uniform stripped of color and rank markings. The face was lined with age, the eyes sharp but exhausted. This was not a politician. This was a survivor. The chamber froze. Species who had never feared humans now leaned back in their seats. The human did not raise their voice. They did not need to. "You are observing an active containment war," the human said. "Your sensors are not malfunctioning. Your science models are not incomplete. Your fear is appropriate." Several counselors tried to speak. Their channels were ignored. The human continued. "For 312 standard years, humanity has operated beyond mapped space. We established deep space habitats, mobile populations, and autonomous war zones. We did this without council support, council approval, or council protection." A pause. "We did this because we were left with no alternative." The display shifted. Stars appeared, thousands of them, marked with timestamps and human designations. Each represented a system that no longer existed. Not council worlds. Not allied species. Human evacuation zones. "We lost these," the human said quietly. "We planned for it. That does not make it easier." The council finally found its voice. "Why show us this now?" demanded one senior member. "Why return it all?" The human looked directly into the camera. "Because the war has changed." The image zoomed out, revealing a vast region of space beyond the containment line. Shadows moved there, slow, patient, countless. "The null advance is not a single entity," the human explained. "It is a behavior, a process. What you have seen is only the forward pressure." Another pause. "It has noticed us." Silence crushed the chamber. Human analysts began transmitting data streams, raw, unfiltered. Models showed the null advance adapting, probing containment points, testing reality itself. It was learning. "The containment lattice will hold," the human said. "For now. But the galaxy behind it is unprepared for the next phase." A counselor spoke carefully. "Then tell us what to do." The human's expression hardened, not with anger, but with resolve. "There is nothing you can do." The words struck harder than any threat. "You do not have the infrastructure. You do not have the mindset. And most importantly," the human said, "you do not have the time." Several species protested. Fleets could be mobilized, resources shared, sacrifices made. The human listened patiently, then responded with a single sentence. We made those offers first. The transmission shifted again. Human fleets appeared, not the distant formation seen before, but ships entering known galactic space. They emerged from folded corridors, deep within Council territory, bypassing every border and defense grid without resistance. Panic spread instantly. Defense platforms powered up. Weapons locked on targets that did not react. The human voice returned, calm and steady. Stand down. These vessels are not here to engage you. The ships moved with terrifying confidence, taking positions near key star systems, trade hubs, and population centers. They did not orbit planets. They watched. A Council military commander whispered, "They could conquer us in hours." A scientist replied, "They're not even trying." That realization was worse. The human speaker addressed the chamber again. Humanity will now implement phase boundary protection. This includes limited presence within your territory. Our ships will intercept null advance probes before they reach inhabited space. A counselor demanded, "Under whose authority?" The human answered immediately, "Realities." No one laughed. Human ships deployed structures, vast, invisible frameworks that anchored space-time itself. Old jump lanes were rewritten. Regions once considered stable suddenly behaved differently. Trade slowed. Travel changed. The galaxy felt constrained, protected, and controlled. Reports flooded in. A null advance fragment attempted to bypass containment. It was erased before sensors could finish locking on. Another tried to tunnel through higher dimensions. Human countermeasures collapsed the pathway instantly. The Council was safe and powerless. Days passed. Human vessels remained silent and vigilant. They did not interfere in politics. They did not issue laws. They did not speak again. They simply prevented extinction. A junior counselor finally asked the question no one else dared. What happens when the war ends? The human appeared one last time. If the war ends, they corrected. The human leaned forward slightly. Humanity will withdraw completely. We will take our defenses with us. We will seal the boundary forever. And us? The council asked. The human's gaze softened, not with pity, but with distance. You will live, they said. That was always the goal. The transmission ended. As the chamber dimmed, council members sat surrounded by a truth more painful than fear. Humanity had returned not as allies, not as conquerors, but as something far worse to their pride. Guardians who did not need permission. And far beyond the stars, the null advance shifted again, slower now, more cautious. For the first time since it began consuming the universe, it had met something that did not break. It had met humanity, and the war was only entering its next phase. The galaxy began to notice the cost before it understood the reason. At first, it was subtle. Trade routes shifted without explanation. Long-used jump corridors grew unstable, forcing ships to reroute through slower paths. Some stars dimmed slightly, not dying, but constrained, wrapped in invisible structures that altered gravity and time. The Council received the reports daily. Human ships were everywhere now, though rarely seen directly. They did not dock. They did not communicate. They existed at the edge of perception, like shadows cast by something too large to face directly. The galaxy was safe, and deeply uncomfortable. It was a junior archivist who first asked the forbidden question. What did it cost them? The Council had seen human power, human technology, human resolve, but no civilization reached that level without paying something in return. So the Council did what it had avoided for centuries. It listened. Human data streams were not locked. They were simply ignored before. Now, with extinction held at bay, the Council began to examine what humanity had left behind. Not the warnings, but the records they never meant to share. Medical logs from deep space habitats, population manifests, psychological assessments, casualty projections marked as acceptable. What they found was not triumph. It was survival math. Humanity had not evacuated entire worlds because it was easy. They had done it because they calculated they had no other choice. Early in the Exodus, entire human populations were relocated into mobile habitats, vast artificial environments drifting between stars. Children were born without planets beneath their feet. Generations grew up under artificial skies, knowing that gravity itself was a controlled privilege. Many never saw a real sun. Human physiology changed. Bone density was altered. Neural patterns adapted to long-term isolation and constant threat. Emotional regulation protocols were introduced, not to remove feeling, but to prevent collapse. Humanity did not become cold. It became disciplined. The Council watched recordings of human commanders explaining casualty expectations to civilians. Not speeches, not propaganda. Simple explanations. If we stay, we die. If we leave, some of us still die. But some of us live long enough to stop it. Millions volunteered. Not soldiers. Engineers. Teachers. Parents. They boarded ships knowing they would never return. The council chamber remained silent as footage played of human worlds being evacuated, not in panic, but in order. Children holding hands. Elders carried aboard vessels. Cities shut down carefully. Power grids powered off cleanly. Ecosystems left intact. Humanity did not burn its past. It preserved it, because it believed there might be a future that could return. The deepest wound came from the war logs. Human fleets had not always been this strong. Early engagements with the Null Advance were catastrophic. Entire task forces were erased, learning what did not work. Experimental weapons failed. Physics itself betrayed human assumptions. And each failure was recorded. Not hidden. Not denied. Adjusted for. Human scientists died testing containment theories that failed by fractions of a second. Engineers burned out stars on purpose to understand how the Null Advance fed. Humanity learned by losing. Again, and again, and again. A council military analyst finally spoke, voice hollow. They fought something that cannot be scared, without ever knowing if it could be stopped. A historian replied quietly. They didn't fight to win. They fought to buy time. The next discovery struck even harder. Humanity had deliberately never informed the galaxy of the true timeline. Their models showed that if panic spread too early, civilizations would collapse before the Null Advance even arrived. Wars would erupt. Resources wasted. Unity shattered. So humans stayed silent. They let themselves be mocked. Dismissed. Forgotten. Because fear would have killed the galaxy faster than the darkness ever could. The Council realized then the final cruelty of their failure. Humanity had not only saved them. Humanity had protected them from the truth. The first direct human casualty count was finally calculated. It was not a number. It was a percentage. Over 30% of humanity's total population had been lost since the Exodus began. Not in one war. Across centuries. Slowly. Deliberately. The Council struggled to process that scale of sacrifice. One member asked, why didn't they ever demand recognition? An elder species answered, because recognition does not stop extinction. The realization settled heavily over the chamber. Humanity had become something the galaxy did not know how to thank. Not heroes, not martyrs, but custodians. And custodians do not ask permission from those they protect. As if responding to the Council's growing awareness, a human transmission finally arrived. Not a broadcast, but a reply to an inquiry no one remembered sending. A single human voice spoke, softer than before. We are aware that our presence has disrupted your systems. This disruption will continue. The Council listened carefully. We regret the inconvenience, the voice continued. But convenience is not compatible with survival. A counselor asked, almost pleading, is there anything we can do? There was a long pause. Then the human answered, remember. Remember that you were warned. Remember that unity delayed is unity denied. And remember that the next threat may not give you centuries. The transmission ended. Beyond the rim, the Null Advance shifted again, not pushing, not retreating, but observing. Probing the containment lattice with increasing intelligence. Human war models updated instantly. Phase thresholds tightened. Humanity adapted. The galaxy lived another day without knowing how close it came to ending. And somewhere deep in human-controlled darkness, a memorial drifted silently through space. No lights, no signals. Just names. Millions of them. A reminder of the price humanity paid so the galaxy could remain unaware. And as the Null Advance learned, slowly and patiently, one truth became clear even to something that did not think like life. Humanity was not trying to defeat it. Humanity was trying to outlast it. And that made them far more dangerous than any enemy the universe had ever faced. The galaxy did not collapse when it realized the truth. That surprised everyone. There were no mass riots. No system-wide wars. No desperate calls for surrender to an enemy that could not listen. Civilization continued. Ships launched. Markets opened. Governments argued, while an extinction-level force pressed against reality itself. The reason was simple. Humanity stood in the way, not as rulers, not as saviors, as a line. And that line did not move. Human ships adjusted their positions with constant precision. Entire regions of space were rewritten into defensive geometries that made no sense to non-human science. Jump travel became slower, but safer. Communication delays increased, but never failed. The galaxy complained. Humanity did not respond. The council convened an emergency session, this time not in fear, but in something far more dangerous to their pride: dependence. They had fleets. They had numbers. They had resources beyond counting. And none of it mattered. A proposal was drafted, carefully worded, heavily revised, and stripped of ego. A request for cooperation. A request to share the burden. A request to fight alongside humanity. When the human reply arrived, it was not hostile. It was final. "You cannot help," the human envoy said, "and we will not let you try." The council reacted with shock. They offered ships. Humans declined. They offered materials. Humans refused. They offered entire populations for evacuation and integration into human space. That offer finally made the human voice change. Not louder, colder. "We will not take your people," the envoy said. "We will not reshape your species. We will not turn your children into soldiers for a war you chose not to believe in." A counselor snapped. "You already altered the galaxy without consent." "Yes," the human replied. "To prevent extinction." Another demanded. "Then why not go further? Why not unify us under your command?" The human paused. This time, the silence carried weight. "Because that is the line," the envoy said. Humanity explained. They had calculated every option. Galactic empire. Forced unity. Resource seizure. Species-wide conscription. Every model showed the same result. Victory against the null advance, followed by something worse. A galaxy that survived only because one species ruled it by fear. Humanity refused that future. They would defend existence. They would not own it. That refusal confused the council more than any show of power. "You could take everything," one counselor said quietly. "We know," the human answered. "That is why we won't." As the meeting ended, the galaxy felt something shift, not in space, but in understanding. Humanity was not holding back because it was weak. Humanity was holding back because it was afraid of itself. Beyond the rim, the null advance made its next move. Instead of pressing harder against the containment lattice, it changed tactics. Fragments of itself detached, small, fast, and precise. They did not target stars. They targeted human infrastructure. Listening posts vanished. Supply corridors collapsed. A mobile habitat was clipped by a distortion wave and torn open. For the first time in decades, the galaxy saw something new. Human losses. Emergency human signals flared. Short, controlled, brutally efficient. Rescue ships appeared within seconds. Damaged sections were sealed. Casualty counts were transmitted, not hidden. The numbers were small, but the response was absolute. Human fleets did not chase the fragments. They adjusted the entire lattice. Whole constellations shifted alignment. Space-time anchors burned through reserves meant to last centuries. Human commanders authorized resource expenditures that made their own analysts hesitate. Why spend so much for so little damage? The answer came quickly. The null advance was testing boundaries. Humanity responded by removing them. Across the galaxy, reality itself hardened. Dimensional seams closed. Exotic physics collapsed into simpler, more stable states. The universe became less flexible, less efficient, but far harder to break. The council realized what humanity was doing. They were not just defending space. They were changing the rules of existence to deny the enemy options. A council scientist whispered, "They're making the universe boring." A human analyst, monitoring the same data from light years away, corrected the assumption. "No," she said. "We're making it survivable." The cost was immense. Human reactors burned through irreplaceable fuel. Experimental constructs were pushed beyond design limits. Lifespans shortened. Stress-related failures increased across human crews. Still, they did not ask for help. Still, they did not retreat. The null advance adapted again, but slower now. More cautiously. Every probe met resistance. Every experiment was punished. For the first time since its existence began, the consuming force encountered a system that learned faster than it did. Humanity noticed. They began phase deep guard. The Council was not informed. They found out when entire regions of space beyond the rim simply vanished from all observation. Not destroyed, not dark, inaccessible. Humanity had folded those regions inward, sealing them into controlled pockets where the null advance could be lured, isolated, and studied, at enormous risk. A council delegation demanded answers. The human response was brief. If containment fails, the envoy said, those regions will collapse completely. And if something is inside them, the council asked, then it dies with them. The implication hit hard. Humanity was willing to sacrifice parts of the universe itself to protect the rest. That was not warfare. That was custodianship at a cosmic scale. As the galaxy struggled to adapt to its new, constrained reality, something else changed. Young species stopped dreaming of conquest. Old empires stopped expanding. Everyone, slowly and uncomfortably, learned the same lesson. Power was no longer about taking. It was about restraint. At the edge of the containment line, a human commander recorded a private log. The enemy is learning, she said. But so are we. And it still doesn't understand the most dangerous thing about us. She paused. We know where to stop. The log ended. Far beyond her position, the null advance shifted once more. Not forward. Not backward. Sideways. Looking for a way around the line humanity refused to cross. And in that moment, for the first time in its endless consumption, the force encountered something truly unfamiliar. Not resistance, not violence, but a species that would rather risk everything than become the very thing it was fighting. The galaxy changed without a declaration. There was no treaty, no ceremony, no official acknowledgement of a new age. Yet everyone felt it. Borders stopped expanding. Military parades quietly ended. The old language of dominance, conquest, and inevitable victory faded from political speech across hundreds of species. Not because humanity demanded it, because the universe itself had made a correction. Human presence remained constant, silent, distant, immovable. Their ships still watched the dark places. Their structures still held reality together along invisible fault lines. The null advance pressed, tested, withdrew, and pressed again, but never broke through. Civilization endured in the shadow of that effort. At first, the Council attempted to regain relevance. They organized summits, issued statements, proposed joint oversight committees for human defensive zones. Every request received the same response: polite, clear, and empty of compromise. This matter is being handled. That was all. No explanation, no debate, no appeal process. The Council, once the center of galactic authority, slowly became something else. A record keeper. Species new to interstellar travel began asking questions their elders struggled to answer. Who controls the dark regions beyond the rim? Who stops the stars from disappearing? Why are there places no ship can go? The answers varied, but the meaning was always the same. The humans. Some spoke the word with awe, some with fear, most with quiet gratitude. Entire generations grew up never seeing a human in person, yet benefiting from their sacrifice daily. Trade flowed safely. Stars lived longer than projected. Wars between major powers never escalated past skirmishes, because something unseen always intervened, subtly altering routes, delaying reinforcements, forcing ceasefires before bloodshed could spiral. Humanity never claimed responsibility, but patterns were impossible to ignore. The galaxy had become supervised, and supervision bred reflection. On worlds once proud of their ancient empires, historians revisited old records. They replayed footage of council sessions where humans had spoken plainly and been ignored. Children were taught those moments as warnings, not jokes. Listen when the quiet ones speak. That lesson spread faster than any law. The council itself fractured, not politically, but morally. Some members resigned in shame. Others dedicated their remaining lives to archiving human history accurately, fearing that future generations might forget again. Statues began appearing across the galaxy. Not heroic depictions of humans conquering enemies, but simple ones. A human engineer adjusting a damaged hull. A human child looking at the stars. A human figure standing alone between darkness and light. Humanity never commented on them. never visited them, never asked for them. That silence hurt more than rejection, because it made one truth unavoidable. Humanity was not protecting the galaxy for recognition. Humanity was protecting it because no one else could. The null advance continued to adapt, but slower now. Each attempt to probe the containment line was met with immediate correction. Human systems anticipated behaviors before they manifested. Traps were set not to destroy, but to observe and limit. A council scientist reviewing the data finally said it aloud. They understand it better than it understands itself. That realization came with another. The war would not end. There would be no final victory. No moment where the darkness was banished forever. Humanity knew this. They had always known. They were not fighting for an ending. They were fighting for continuation. That understanding reshaped galactic philosophy. Civilizations stopped seeking perfect solutions. They invested in resilience instead. Redundancy replaced efficiency. Cooperation replaced competition in places where it mattered most. The galaxy became harder to break. And humanity watched, quietly approving, never interfering. Time passed. Centuries, by council reckoning. Human ships aged. Some were replaced. Others were repaired beyond what non-human engineers thought possible. Human lifespans shortened slightly due to long-term exposure to warped space-time. They accepted it. New generations of humans were born knowing only duty, not glory. They learned history not as triumph, but as responsibility. We hold the line, their teachers said, so others can choose what to become. The council finally attempted one last act of relevance. They composed a message, not a request, not a demand, but an apology. It was long overdue. The message acknowledged every ignored warning, every dismissed concern, every moment where convenience was chosen over courage. They did not expect a reply. They received one anyway. A single human transmission reached the council chamber. Short, direct. We acknowledge receipt. Nothing more. No forgiveness. No condemnation. Just acknowledgement. That hurt the most. Because it meant the apology changed nothing. The galaxy continued on. Protected. Constrained. Alive. Then, without warning, a new species made first contact. They emerged from a distant dwarf galaxy, curious and eager, their technology young but rapidly evolving. They asked the same questions humans once had. What lay beyond the dark? Why were some regions forbidden? Who decided? The council hesitated, then answered honestly. We once thought we knew. We were wrong. They told the story, not of heroes, but of mistakes. Of silence chosen when action was needed. Of a species that stepped forward alone when everyone else stepped back. The new species listened carefully and believed them. That alone made humanity's sacrifice worthwhile. At the edge of observable space, a human commander watched the null advance test a containment boundary and fail. She logged the event, adjusted parameters, and leaned back in her chair. Another cycle complete. Another day bought. Her ship drifted in perfect stillness, held in place by forces older than stars and newer than language. She allowed herself one quiet thought, something humans rarely shared anymore. Maybe they won't repeat our mistake. Then she closed the log and returned to her work. Far beyond her position, the darkness paused, not retreating, not advancing. Watching, learning, and for the first time in its endless existence, the consuming force faced a truth it could not erase. The universe was no longer defenseless. It had grown guardians. Not gods, not rulers, just humans, standing watch over a galaxy that finally understood them. Too late to help, but not too late to learn. The final message did not arrive with urgency. There were no alarms, no emergency protocols, no sudden darkening of stars. It appeared quietly, threaded through communication channels so old most systems barely remembered how to read them. The signal bypassed modern relays and arrived everywhere at once. On council worlds, frontier colonies, independent stations, and even ships drifting between stars. It was unmistakably human. Not because of encryption or signature patterns. Because of its simplicity. Across the galaxy, screens displayed the same short transmission. No image. No authority marker. No command tone. Just words. This is a general notice. Phase boundary protection has reached long-term stability. The continuation threshold is acceptable. Most beings did not understand what that meant at first, but the older ones did. It meant the war, if it could even be called that, had entered its final state. Not victory, not defeat, balance. The null advance still existed. It always would. Humanity had confirmed what their ancestors feared centuries ago. The Force was not an invader to be destroyed, but a consequence of reality itself. A pressure that emerged wherever complexity grew too dense, too fast. Life invited it. Humanity had simply learned how to live with that truth. The message continued. Human presence within council space will now reduce to minimum observation levels. Defensive structures will remain active. Intervention protocols will remain automated. Translations spread quickly. Humans were leaving again. Not in panic, not in secrecy, but deliberately. Human ships began withdrawing from visible positions. One by one, they slipped out of known space, folding into regions no non-human vessel could follow. Some decommissioned themselves entirely, becoming silent anchors embedded into space-time, immovable, eternal. The galaxy watched, unsure how to feel. Relief came first, then fear, then something deeper. Loss. Because for the first time in centuries, the presence that had quietly guaranteed survival was fading back into myth. The council convened for what many knew would be its last truly honest session. No speeches were prepared. No political maneuvers attempted. They simply spoke. What happens now? One asked. A scientist answered, now we live. Another added, and we remember. The final line of the human message appeared. You are safe. Stay curious. Stay united. Do not repeat our mistakes. Then the signal ended. No follow-up. No contact frequency. No way to reply. Humanity had not asked to be thanked. They had not waited for understanding. They had done what needed to be done and stepped away. Years passed. Nothing broke. Stars continued burning. Trade resumed new patterns adapted to altered space. Children grew up hearing stories of the silent guardians, humans who stood between existence and erasure without ever asking to rule it. Some doubted the stories. Then a star dimmed at the rim and corrected itself before anyone could panic. Automated human defenses still worked. Always. Civilizations matured differently now. Expansion slowed. Exploration became careful, thoughtful. When new species reached the stars, the first lesson they were taught was not how to conquer space, but how to listen. Council archives were rewritten, not to flatter, but to warn. The old footage of humans being dismissed was preserved unedited. It became required study. This, the instructors said, is what arrogance looks like. And somewhere deep beyond observation, humanity continued. Not thriving, not declining, enduring. Human populations were smaller now, purpose-driven, bound together by shared memory rather than territory. They lived in controlled systems where the null advance could never reach critical density. Children still learned about Earth, not as a lost paradise, but as a reminder of why roots mattered. Some humans asked, quietly, if they would ever return. The answer was always the same, only if needed. Generations passed without need. The galaxy held. Then, far beyond the original containment line, something changed. The null advance slowed. Not temporarily, fundamentally. Human instruments detected a shift so subtle it would have been missed by any other species. The pressure that once grew with complexity now stabilized, adapting to the universe humanity had reshaped. Not eliminated, integrated. A senior human analyst recorded the finding with shaking hands. It's learning restraint, she whispered. Her commander nodded slowly. So did we. That moment never reached the galaxy. It didn't need to. Because the true victory was not survival. It was understanding. Eons from now, long after current civilizations faded, long after new species rose and fell, the structures humanity built would still be there, silent, patient, correcting reality when it bent too far toward collapse. No monuments bore their names. No empire carried their flag. But existence itself carried their mark. A universe slightly less fragile than before. And if one listened closely, in the deep quiet between stars, there was a silence that was not emptiness. It was choice. The choice humanity made when ignored. The choice to stand alone. The choice to protect without ruling. The choice to leave without being asked. Humanity did not vanish. Humanity became the space where disaster never quite happened. And somewhere, far from applause and memory, a human watch station drifted in the dark. Its crew monitored the universe, logged the data, adjusted the balance. And when their shift ended, Another human quietly took their place. No ceremony, no glory, just duty. Because when the universe needed someone to stay awake, humans already were.